Good morning, good afternoon, and kalispera from Los Angeles. My name is Sharon Gerstel, and I have the honor of directing the UCLA Stavros Niarchos Foundation Center for the Study of Hellenic Culture. Throughout 2021, the year in which we celebrate the bicentennial of the Greek Revolution, we've been hosting a large number of events about Greeks and Philhellenes involved in the liberation of a people and the establishment of a new nation. We continue our programming this year with events about Lord Byron, Ioannis Makrianis, and the many Americans who sent funds to support the revolution. Please consult our center's website for information on these and other programs. Today's event, our first of this academic year, involves both a Greek hero, Marcus Botsaris, and a Philhellene, the award-winning writer and director Chris Jaymes. I'm very grateful to Professor Nicholas Alexiou, who approached us about hosting this innovative event. Nicholas Alexiou, who will be today's co-moderator, is an award-winning professor who has taught in the Department of Sociology at Queen's College, CUNY since 1990. At Queen's College, he established the first community and oral history archive, library, and museum for the Greeks of New York, and he's the director of the very important research of the Hellenic American Project. I should also mention that he's the author of 6 books of poetry, including most recently, The Silver Sphinx, which was published by Melani Press in Athens in 2019. Our co-moderator today is our center's associate director, Dr. Simos Zenios, who is charged with teaching modern Greek language and culture at UCLA and also directing our many outreach programs to the community. Professor Zenios' research focuses on the relation between aesthetics and political power in European literature of the long 19th century, with emphasis on the lyric poetry of the Greek Revolution. He's currently completing a book project entitled Voice of Power, Voice of Terror, Lyric, Violence, and the Greek Revolution. I'm very grateful to Professor Alexiou and Dr. Zenios for their interest and engagement with this topic, and I'm especially grateful to the wonderful Chris Jaymes for his willingness to share with us from Hawaii his passion of 10 years, his best-selling graphic novel, Sons of Chaos. I'd like to now turn the screen over to Professor Alexiou to introduce our speaker.
Thank you very much, Sharon. It's really an honor. I'm very happy to be here with you. And as you said, in this dual, attempt to commemorate the 200-year anniversary, a very important event, and of course, with a new Philhellene, as you mentioned, a modern Philhellene, Chris Jaymes, who is active in the entertainment industry for 3 decades, and he began his career as an actor with some hit shows, including Lost and Party of 5. Also, he moved into writing and directing, and his first feature film, In Memory of My Father, attained 20 international awards and nominations. He has since directed TV shows and movies with legendary actors such as Martin Short and William Shatner. His writings includes numerous screenplays, including the original screenplay entitled Unconditional. It was acknowledged as a 2016 semi-finalist for the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, the Nicol Fellowship Award. Also, his first book, Boxing Day, was published in 2008, surrounding his experience as an aid worker during the 2004 Thailand tsunami. He has spent years researching dolphins, whales, and sharks, and helps run the non-profit organization, the Island Dolphin Care. Also, during the pandemic, Jaymes worked with Sean Penn and his non-profit organization CORE, setting up the initial COVID test and vaccination infrastructure throughout the country. And of course, after 10 years of very hard work, Jaymes recently completed the graphic novel, Sons of Chaos. And he talks about Greece and independence and Marcus Botsaris in particular. And also the book was published both in English and in Greek. In English was released by Penguin Random House, and in Greece was published by Cactus Publishing with the title Τα παιδιά της Επανάστασης, Sons of Revolution. Chris Jaymes, welcome you to this event, and thank you very much for accepting immediately to participate to our dual institution event. Also, I would like to mention that the coordinator and I cannot hear you. Yes. The co-host and also the moderator for this event is Jaymes, who is Sharon mentioned, the associate director. And of course, during the discussion with the author, you can send questions either by texting or raising your hand. And with the help of the assistant director, Ellen Evaristo and Simos, we all try to accommodate and give you a chance to ask questions and participate. Chris, again, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
When I saw your book, of course, it got my attention immediately, as everybody else, I think, who had the chance to see and read your book, to come across it. And to my mind, I came immediately, look at this, 200 years later, and we have an American Philhellene. And for me, that was very, very important because this concept is a very complex phenomenon, Philhellenism. Sometimes it's stronger, sometimes it's weaker, sometimes it doesn't exist. But with you now, we see a revival, a new continuity into this long chain. And of course, when we referring to this word Philhellenism, that word exists for centuries. We find it in Plato, in Herodotus, when they mention people who supported the Greeks during the Persian Wars. But in the most recent era, it is related to the support that either military or by citizens who assisted Greece during the War of Independence. They participated either in battles, in military operations, or they contributed financial support, producing works of literature and art, or through other actions. So for us here, living in America and being Greek Americans, and of course the dual institutions focusing on the revolution this year, we talk a lot about American Philhellenism. And of course, it was the same thing that happened all over the world in Europe. On one hand, you have the masses, the people, the ordinary people, the citizens, to support the revolution, and then the government somehow they stayed back. The paradox in America was that a lot of people supported creating committees, writing letters to the government, collecting money, food, medical things to send to Greece. Writers wrote beautiful poems and stories, as you did. But on the other hand, the government never recognized officially the revolutionary government of Greece. And of course, we have the establishment of the Monroe Doctrine in 1822 that establishes immediately American neutrality and isolationism in foreign affairs. So we come 200 years later, and we have you bringing back the story of the revolution, and in particular, the story of the hero Marcus Botsaris, a very tragic person. So tell us, what is the story or the focus of the book, and how did you decide to write a graphic novel about the Greek War of Independence?
Yeah, that's a good question. I still ask myself often, why did I do this? But it's so. First of all, thanks for that long-winded introduction of my existence. It sometimes gives me the illusion that I've done something in my life occasionally, and the concept of Hellenism, something you don't have in the U.S. I don't think you grow up talking about people around the world coming together because they want to support, the U.S. in a challenge that they're, and so they're so passionate about, so I didn't ever even understand what that term meant until more recent times. So having myself somewhat associated with that title is again like I think it's been 40 years of searching for an identity. So if I can have the label of Phil Helen, like my identity is now having some value finally. So this is a bonus for me. So that's good. Thanks for that. In terms of the book, the story, coming upon my own interest in 1821 and Greece and the revolution was stimulated by someone who has become more like a brotherly kind of best friend, is a guy named Nick Lambro, who brought it to my attention. And he was really a pushy Greek American, like, you must, make a movie of this. You must bring this to, attention, because not enough people know about these stories and they're amazing. So over the course of time, I started like looking at books and reading about it, and inevitably something stimulated a part of me to take a further interest. I can go through all of the pragmatic elements that led to me doing it, but I think, in our lifetime, you kind of go down some sort of a random path. That path gets exposed to various things, and occasionally something stimulates you enough to engage and devote time and energy to it. And so you only have time to do so many of those things in your life. And this one popped up, and for whatever reason, things just aligned with the timing and my own psychological equation. And then the concept of a revolution in Greece just hit me in the right way at the right moment. Before I spin out talking, let me show you the people that don't know the book or haven't seen it. It's probably helpful if you get a sense of what it actually is. So let me pull up this thing. Yeah.
Also, as we said, that the Greek War of Independence was and still remains an international event with many dimensions. So I would like to know, of all the Greek heroes of that period, why did you choose Marcus Botsaris?
Yeah. Well, here, let me walk you through this basic thing, and then I'll kind of hit on Botsaris. So the book, as stated, it came out in the US and in Greece, put out by Penguin Random House and IDW here at Cactos in Greece. And what started off in my mind was not to make a graphic novel, was not to write a book. It was to make a movie or some kind of a series about it. And so back then, 10 plus years ago, there wasn't as much information on the internet about it, and there wasn't much information in English about it. So it became a huge process of research, which we can talk about later. And the research then initiated me into defining what story to tell, about what period of time, what part of the revolution, why, and one that would stimulate people to care, to learn if they were not already aware of this, especially a non-Greek audience. So, so basically, 1821, for those of you that don't know, which I assume most of this crowd would know, but 1821 is the sort of representative year of Greece having a revolution, getting en route to gaining its independence, though it took a significantly longer period of time than a year. It's still happening probably in some ways. That's sort of when it began. And the story that I tell, like you said, it's told through Marcus Botsaris. So I'll get into explaining that. But the basic process is I started to make a screenplay, which became a graphic novel. So it started off, I was writing it all out which ended up becoming hundreds of pages, and then turning that into a breakdown of every page being turned into a block, notes, research, became dealing with an artist. We worked arduously across countries. He lives in Argentina, and each page slowly came to life. And then this is the full opening spreads of the book. So there's a couple of these sort of things. Somebody's trying to get in the waiting room. So that's some images from the book. And so there you go. So now at the left side, the right is the Greek cover. So that's the excitement there. Okay, so the
this is a very I don't want to say unusual, but it is very pioneering way to approach such a large thing as the Greek War of Independence. That's why it makes it more interesting. But you, as a creator of this, as also a researcher, do you feel that something was lost? But on the other hand, you added something in this new form that you attend, script graphic novel, and also. It is some parts that you left out of your research because of the needs to fit, not fitting into the novel.
Well, yeah, you have to focus the story you're telling to fit the arena you're telling it to, right? So when you start off with the screenplay, you have more space, you can write. When you get down to a book, then it becomes the structure of the book. And then with a graphic novel, that structure gets even tighter because now it's what you can tell through visual images in a short period of time. So each step becomes more and more economic. The process begins, to your point, figuring out which story to tell, what information you're going to think is going to be engaging to people, and what resonates with my own psychology so that I have the capacity to tell the story. So initially, that started with research. I think the research part was the most significant because, especially when there's not a lot of information on a time where there's not a lot of resources and you don't have photographs, videos, anything like this, you have only pieces of relics of paintings, and each different resource was told by someone with a different bias. So now you're reading the historic information and it's contradicting other resources. So what your job becomes is investigative reporting, where you have to read as much stuff as you can. I had walls with notes and names, because in the beginning, remembering when you don't speak Greek, remembering the name of cities and people is a challenging board game in itself. So I had to have maps of places, pictures of people, and so forth and so on. And then the more you read, you start to realize that everybody has a different telling. Right. So then you have to discern what you think.
Some previous knowledge, or you've been exposed to Greek culture before that?
No, but before that, I had a very cliche American, ignorant idea of Greece. It was, euros and columns and parties in Mykonos. So I didn't have any. I heard about them having something to do with democracy. So we're only a few generations down the line, a few hundreds, thousand years, and we're immune to the awareness of what the Greeks actually achieved in a time where you didn't have any starting point like we have now for anything. We can pick up anything and learn about it, and within moments, there's a plethora of information that then we have to decipher, but are too lazy to. But them, they had to build each thing from scratch, and now we're already into this place where we take for granted everything that has been established, and our awareness is non-existent about a lot of it. So back to the point that you're saying. So in terms of like deciphering, you have to build all the pieces of information, and then you have to figure out what you think the history might have been. Once forming my ideas around that, then became which version of the story to tell. And that's where I came to Marcus Barcelos. And with Marcus Barcelos, the reason I sort of gravitated in that direction was, first of all, I could relate to the idea of a kid growing up in Sully, in a Sullied family, with a father who was a leader. And I started to have these images of myself being in this little village where every day there was an attack from Ali Pasha and Yanina. And I just started to have the feeling of being a child born into this situation where you have no knowledge of it being abnormal. And all of a sudden your day-to-day life is not you choosing what to do or what to eat or who you're going to spend your day with. It's wondering what's going to happen, wondering who you might lose today, wondering if you're going to have to kill someone today. And it was so different from the reality that we now live in that it stimulated a visceral emotional response in me, seeing myself in that position. So then Markos became sort of the vehicle. Now, I obsessively researched him, and he was so interesting in various ways. He wasn't a typical hero. He was born into a father who was a hero, but he was also very intelligent. He, wrote different kinds of dictionaries of languages and different types of things. So his mind was developed at a young age, as well as being forced to sort of be a leader. So I tapped into the psychology of what if I was born into this situation of chaos, hence the title Sons of Chaos, being a child born into a time of chaos where your life is defined for you based on circumstances that you wanted nothing to do with, and those circumstances being at a level of violence and uncertainty beyond anything we can comprehend. And then wanting nothing to do with the fighting or the leadership, but being a kid born into a leader where you're forced now to take on that role. So that's what Markos became more of a symbol for me. I didn't tell the factual piece by piece story of him. He becomes more of a beacon of various elements that he leads you through 1821 in a manner of things that I wanted the viewers to experience that I thought were interesting. So some parts he's very much Marcus Barcelos, but some parts he might be a little bit of Odysseus, or he goes into different sort of spaces. He's in the battles in different places around Greece that he didn't actually experience, so he leads you through it. However, there are elements. It was very precise where I chose to alter his reality. It was always based on a psychological symbolism, right? So giving you an example of that, in the book, he's taken prisoner by Ali Pasha. In his life, he was not. Ali came and destroyed his family, his villages. They were taken to the islands, and the French taught them military, kind of training. And instead, I told the story from a psychological standpoint of him being taken prisoner, because his family, his life, his psychology was controlled and taken prisoner for his entire existence by basically Ali Pasha, who was honed in on the Sullites with his own agenda. So instead of like pulling them apart, I thought it was more engaging for a viewer to be inside of the Ali Pasha syndrome and bring Markos close to that with his own internal issues now externalized. And to summarize, to finish that, then I'll stop talking so much. The reason I chose this portion was also because after looking at everything, I felt that the reason, or at least one of the key reasons the revolution could succeed, was because Ali Pasha was in charge of Yanina. The reason I think that is because Ali Pasha had his own agenda. He didn't care whatsoever about the wishes or desires of the Sultan. He didn't care about sustaining longevity of the Ottoman Empire. He cared about carrying out a psychological equation that was stimulated from where he felt an inferior child to his mother, and they were basically left and abandoned by his father. So had Ali cared more about the legacy of an empire instead of his own selfish agenda, he would have been carrying out the wishes and desires of the Sultan, and probably they would have had a much different result. But because Ali's focus was over here, not on what the Sultan wanted, it allowed the Greeks to make more progress in their attempted uprising.
So, Chris, thank you. The first question actually takes you back to the Marcus Botsaris topic we were just discussing. It's from Renee Papas, who also says that she loves what you did, and she's asking whether you found poems written about Marcus Botsaris by American and Swiss poets, and also there was also a play that was presented in New York in the late 1820s. What kind of research did you do for Marcus Botsaris' life in particular?
Yeah, thanks. That's interesting. I have no idea about the play, so I'd love to hear about that. I did come upon different poems, and mostly it was just devouring every piece of information that I could find. And again, like I said, there wasn't much information in English. So then I went to Greece and traveled all over the place and asked people questions and spent times in libraries and museums and asked people to translate things for me. So really, I ended up building 3 sort of books that probably total about 1,500 pages. And so Marcus Barcelos takes a big section of these books. But yeah, no, I'd love to learn about the plays and more of the poems. If you can send me information, that'd be great.
Halleck has one great poet, an American poet who also is a statue here at the Central Park. He has a very large, a very huge poem, and a very important poem, Fitz Green Halleck. You had an audience in your mind for writing this. You had a target audience, and also I know it was a pandemic and many things didn't go according to the plan, but you have any when you compare the Greek edition and the English version of it, how was the reception into 2 different languages and audiences?
So I think initially it's a combination. Like the fact that as I learned about the revolution, and when my brain calculated how many things directly or indirectly I think this influenced to this, whatever you want to call it, it depends what side you're on, but like the stabilization of the Western society at that point in time really, I think, defined a lot of the existence that we live in today. It defined a lot of how Europe is laid out, and it's ambiguous what might have happened if the Ottoman Empire continued to expand and spread to the West. So it's hard to predict what life could have been, and the fact that just 200 years ago this happened, and it should never have been possible. It should not have worked. The fact that this small little group of Greeks managed to stand up and stimulate the fall of a larger power, like the little underdogs kicked the ass of the huge, power, is amazing. So the fact that I didn't know about this, and that most humans that I spoke to that weren't Greek didn't know about this either, was like, well, the sort of the equivalent of when I was a kid watching movies like Braveheart or Dances with Wolves. Braveheart, I didn't know anything about Scottish history or anything like this, and so that stimulated an awakening in me of learning more about the history. And so I think the goal was to try to do that for the non-Greek audience. But then as you get down the road of creating that, like, you want so badly and hope so badly that the Greek audience doesn't hate you for what you're trying to do. And then that gets touchy, because you're altering reality to fit the medium of the story you're telling, and you have to have a beginning, middle, and end, even when there's not one. So you get vulnerable about both audiences. So to answer your question, it was always, it started off as one, but then it became, you can't have one without the other and feel good about yourself. And the reception has been great. I think, like, so far, the Greek audience has been overwhelmingly supportive, way more than I would have imagined, which has become the most important part to me. The American audience, the people that engage love it, but getting the Americans to engage is much harder, because if they don't know about this, why do they care to know now? So now it's being force fed, which means marketing expenses, efforts, getting in front of them somehow, which is very difficult nowadays.
If I may add on to that, your book has been published in English by major publishers, Penguin and IDW, which is a major publisher in the graphic novel business. So I'm curious, what was their reaction? What was the response when you came to them with this idea of creating a graphic novel about an event that probably it was the first time they were hearing about that? What was the initial response?
Yeah, it totally was the first time they had heard about it. But what I delivered was a completed book. So we did it with the guy who I mentioned earlier, Nick Lambro, and I, and the few little team members that we had, a very small team of people and artists, the guy that helped with the lettering, so forth and so on. We did all of the initial work, took on all of the initial investment to create this very overly ambitious, large, expensive book to make. So by the time they were seeing it, we didn't have the full book for them, but we had a preview that was still the same oversized large book, but it was just 25 pages of it. And so initially in my pitch to them, they were interested, but not everyone was on board. And then when I sent the presentation book, then everyone switched over and said, okay, yeah, we want to make this book. But to be honest, the publishing houses are layered, and there's people all over. I've probably met 3 in person, and then over the course of the years, maybe seen names of 10 or 20, but every 6 months those names change because everybody quits or gets fired. So like we're part of the publishing company, while all the executives and people that work for them come and go. So it's hard to say that the reality of that business.
Thank you. Let me convey 2 questions from the audience. The one, I think it's prompted by the background that you have there. It's from Gina Gordon, who is asking, what is your background and where do you live in the US? And the second from Sharon Gerstel is taking you back to Botsaris, who is, Sharon is asking whether you traveled to Greece to visit sites associated with Markos.
Okay, so first of all, a couple months ago, relocated from LA to Hawaii, hence that. So, and I will tell you, well, only because I don't want everybody to come here and take it over like it's awful. You shouldn't come. There's nothing enjoyable about being in Hawaii. No, stay in LA. So that's where I am now, and it's amazing, and it's hard to imagine not being here. though it's a whole different form of living, and you're out in the world and outdoors and using your body as opposed to just living on a computer. I've never been off of a computer this much in my life. It's the best thing ever. I highly recommend you all start trying to live more outdoors, because it's the first time I've done it in a decade, and it's amazing. Okay, we'll have my health and mental health forum later, but the okay, so Botsaris, I travel all over Greece, and I went from days where I would be down in Monemvasia, and I would find a story, and I would drive up to Yanina, like, and that would be a drive for the day, and I'd go from being like in the ocean to having a road that I couldn't drive on after driving this mountain road that was blocked by a big ice boulder. And then I would drive back around, and then I'd, come back, and then I'd go to Odysseus's cave. In terms of like where the real life Markos, I was definitely around Messalongi and the hills of Sully, and I went through a lot of these places. But Markos's journey extends in the book beyond some of these places. So I went all over the place, and because my time there was always in winter, it was very not representative of current modern day in islands alone on, was it Kamisi Beach, Community Beach, like the Black Beach there. I was all over Greece in winter with nobody. And so I could stand in a spot and just imagine it come to life, of like imagining the blood shed and seeing how you would use a space, or the little cobblestone streets of Monemvasia. I actually got like a flu when I was there, and I was staying in this place where it was kind of underground and there was windows at the top. And so I was seeing people's feet passing. And so I had all these images of people like fighting and hearing stuff, and being a little kid in there and seeing someone's face fall by the window, so I was in these places alone where I could imagine them coming to life. And the craziest reality was like, oh, wow, this is like 5 people ago, like if you go back through your, grandma, great grandpa, this was like 5, 6, 7 people ago. And we're here now with our, with all of this stuff, and like not having to even think about how to get from a city to the next city, no maps, no anything, when just a minute ago, it was like archaic, brutal life with no entitlement and no support, and so getting a reminder of that was amazing. How much we just take for granted, that when we're dancing at a club, paying for a $1,000 bottle of vodka to sit at a table, and pissed off because the island doesn't have fast internet service. It's like how quickly we have morphed into this like super, attractive in one sense and super unattractive in another sense, is crazy when you slow down to think about it, and you look at just how recent we were living in a very different way.
When we start talking about the event with Sharon and Simos some time ago, among the things that were striking to all of us, as particular to me, is that the word chaos that you use.
Yeah.
I would like to explain a few things, because it's a very explosive word, the word chaos. So why you use this particular? Is there any mythological connections you make besides?
Yeah, everything that you said. So first of all, I think you just said it. The word is explosive, and Greeks are explosive. Whether it's the history, whether it's their personalities, they can be so warm and smiley, and then the next minute they're like yelling in your face, and then the next minute they're like hugging you. It's like that's within the bloodline, I think. And so you can take it back to the mythological, the stories of the Greek gods born from chaos, and which ties down into the all the themes of the book, for me came from being a human, not a single layered, non-dimensional cliche icon of a hero, but like a human being that's layered and vulnerable and scared and fearful, that's born into this situation. And I think to humanize the reality is the important part, so that people kind of can connect with history, as opposed to seeing it as very one-dimensional, is like you have to humanize it. And so the being born into this kind of chaos without having a choice, without, you know, and you're now a part of that world. You are a piece that helps define the structured equation, which is chaos in that period of time. And so now you can even take it a step further. Like the Greeks have this pattern that they follow, where they are they despise one another, they fight with their neighbor, they're pissed off, they want, but then bring in a force from the outside that's impossible, and they come together magically, they deal with it, they kick its ass, and then they just go back to fighting each other. And they do this again and again throughout history, where it's like they have, I don't know if it's like in their genealogical like DNA, but if you want the Greeks to ever wake up and stop being annoying and fighting and lazy and one another, just drop something that's totally impossible in front of them, and they'll magically come to life and fix it better than anybody, and they'll make a form or a structure out of it that didn't exist before. But then, like, if it's not challenging, then they just go back to fighting each other, and being pissed off about their neighbor. So
this is very interesting. I would like to connect it with that, because it's okay to talk about 1821, but you as a modern intellectual and creator, I would like to see your contribution to the relevance of all this, and if we want to connect it what we just said and what we discuss here with the audience, what is the message that the readers can take from the Greek War of Independence that resonates today? So especially with the pandemic, the economic crisis, the environmental crisis, the climate change, etc. So you talk about resilience. First of all, you talk about finding a way to be creative in a chaotic situation. So elaborate on that. I'd like to see the relevance. Yeah.
Sure. I think the relevance, to your point, today is the biggest, most important message that you could ever ask for. And like in what the Greeks showed us is that in the face of absolute tyranny, when it's an impossible obstacle, that they could come together and overpower it. The Greek Revolution, and I've said this before, for me, there's no better exemplification of the power of unification, right? They unified against their desires to work together to conquer, or at least stimulate the beginning of the fall of an empire. They had to organize and work together, even though they didn't love each other, they didn't want to deal with one another, they hated a lot of their neighbors, but they came together for the purpose of the better good. And there's never been a time in all of our lives where I think that's been as necessary as it is now. Right now, this larger challenge that we face, I think we would be so much further along if we had the capacity to unify. But in everywhere around the globe, it's like the opposite has happened. And instead, it's been used to make a more divisive society or a culture. And so what needs to happen for us to get out of this is for us to kind of look past what the programming and the information that just keeps coming at us from different ways that's not aligned, and find a way to push that aside and say, hey, like we need to become friends now and find a way through this, or it's going to keep going, you know, for another year and another year and another year.
Very, very, very interesting. Would you consider creating another book, and are there any other projects on the horizon that you can share with us today?
And
Sure.
Chris, before you answer, let me add another aspect to that, because we have a question from April Kalogeropoulou, who is asking that whether you're interested in going back to the film idea now that the book is out, if you want to revisit it in another meeting, the idea of the Greek, the story of the Greek Revolution and Botsaris.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've rewritten the script into a limited series for television. I'm starting to have meetings on that pre-pandemic, and then haven't really started again post-pandemic. So yeah, I have to find a way to stimulate that project to come back to life. But definitely, that's, I think, the goal. I think we would all want more than anything is to see it alive at a different level. I mean, the book is amazing, and I'm proud of it. But getting people to really respond anywhere in the world to books now is a grind. So getting it to be in a living format would be amazing.
And we have another comment, Anonymous, that's asking whether you saw your material under a new light when you were translating it, as it were, into a graphic novel, like whether the process of adaptation to a different medium made you see something different that wasn't there at the beginning, and how was your collaboration with the artist in general? Was it a close one? Was it did you change material to fit the graphic novel medium?
Yeah. So initially, you have no choice, because you start to realize a written page can turn into 5 or 10. One page could be 5 or 10 pages in a comic book. So you're forced to like really economize, and it's, I think what I realize, it's one of the most challenging disciplines that doesn't get the respect that it deserves, because you're having to tell layered stories and emotions in single panels where you can have a little bit of text and a picture. It's the hardest thing I probably have ever done, and it took me way longer than it should have. So yeah, the layers of altering and transforming the story from this to this is challenging, and you do lose a lot of the information, but you find ways of conveying the personality or the emotional moment in a different way. So it's very, very specific. In terms of the artist, Alejandra, he is amazing. He's in Argentina. We did the entire book together over Skype. We met in person only one time before we started really working together, and he's much better now. But in the beginning, he spoke Spanish and I spoke English, and I spoke a little Spanish, he spoke a little English, and that didn't change much. It was, and so the hardest part about it was sometimes if I was seeing something in one way, you know, you wait for the artist. You're waiting, like I'm waiting for a page, and it's like, you know, it comes in the artist's time, not your time. So 3 weeks would pass, and I'd get the page, and I'd be like, oh God, I totally forgot that this other element needs to be in this drawing. And so like, so scared to have to tell him like that we needed to change it again and then wait for 3 weeks. The fact that he didn't like insult me in a really like significant manner on a daily basis is shocking. But yeah, no, he elevated the work to a level beyond what I could have imagined.
Did you have any input on the style, on the design of the drawings, or was it more this is how you envision your words, and then you build from there?
So initially, I had created all of these books that had like images and you know, paintings and things from the time. So every location that was included in the book. Every character, every outfit, everything had already been built for him. So, and he is very specific in the style that he draws. And so it's kind of like you accept the style of the artist prior to hiring them. You know, they're not going to come and do something totally different. So that's your job. Just like when you're casting an actor for a movie or a TV show, if you cast them and then want them to be something different, it's not going to work out well. So once you make the choice that he's the one, you buy into that style. There was a few things that he and I had to actually talk through. His style before the book was very specific in some ways. Like he would make very slits for eyes more so than big eyes. And I was like, oh no, there's some moments we need to see the character's eyes. And he was very passionate, I don't do this. And so it's like, okay, how do I alter his, without disrespecting him, to coerce him that this is the right direction for the book? And after kind of really, what happened is he read the story again, and he got the deeper layers of the emotional content, and then came back and sent me a picture with the main character's eyes open, and it was beautiful. And then we didn't ever have a challenge together again.
Thank you. And we have another question, again anonymous from the audience, which is taking you back to your travels in Greece. What's your impression of Greece today? When was the last time that you visited? What's your impression of modern Greece?
So I don't have a huge developed experience of modern day Greece. I have my last time I was there was a couple of Decembers ago with Andreas Pefanis, who is in the chat now, who is the head of Athens Con. And honestly, my experience there was really just Athens Con, because before that, it was me alone traveling all over Greece doing research. So I didn't have a lot of significant interaction with people that wasn't geared towards the research. So I was there in winter. I had anything of that was representative of modern life there at all. It's mostly alone. Then I came back, and it was all about Andreas's convention. And so saying that, that was the most amazing experience that I've had with anything to do Greek, because it was the culmination and sort of the celebration of the completion of the book, and the amount of love and support that I got from Andreas and all of the people that he put together and everything that happened there. It definitely made me want to come back and find ways to justify working and doing projects there, and hoping one day that I can do enough to get what Sharon got with her honorary Greek citizenship, so that I can find a way to have more life there.
And we have another question, and I want to acknowledge also April Kalogeropoulou, who asked a question prior, who has made a movie about Laskarina Bouboulina. And the question asks, how can the story of the revolution become part of the mainstream in Hollywood in terms of heroic stories?
Well, I think there's a couple of ways that can happen. One is the right legacy investor that cares so much about this story that wants to just support a very expensive project. Two, someone at a studio or network who feels impassioned about it. That there are some people that are Greek American that are in these positions, one of them or not one of them. Or three, some celebrities that have the value behind them to get a project like this made, take interest in working on the project. Like Playtone, Tom Hanks, there's a lot of different people that have interest, that if they got interested in a project surrounding this revolution, that they could get it done And that's pretty much what it takes if you're not going to do a really low budget version.
Thank you, Chris. Nico, I don't know if you want to ask any next questions.
I think the audience helped us to complete the questionnaire. I would like to, Chris to say a few more things. What if he thinks that we left something out, and if things getting better, you think it can be a tool to present your book in various universities or bookstores. Is this a possibility that you see, both here or in Greece?
The possibility of it.
Signing.
Oh yeah.
If things getting better, you think that this is a prospect, this is something that you had in mind and it started because of the pandemic, and is a possibility to start again, to visit different cities or going to Greece?
So yeah, I think, the pandemic like shut down a lot of plans that were already in place. There were conventions throughout Greece. Even I was being talked to do things with Aristotle University and this stuff. So it all kind of fell out. So I think that some of that can resurge. I think there was a bigger amount because this was the 200-year anniversary. So there was initially there was more money to be spent on events. There were so many things that were happening in Greece that just kind of didn't happen to the level that they were imagined. So I think to some degree every year there's room for this. Every March there's room for a reminder of and so I don't think it has to end because of the we're going to be in the 201st anniversary. So I think it's possible. It just if the interest is there and people keep stimulating events, then yeah.
Nico,
do you think that the book can be translated into Spanish, which is more a larger audience, and also the artist is
Yeah, that would be great. That's a great idea. I would love to have a Spanish version. Have to find a publishing company who would be interested.
And Chris, we have a question from the audience. From your research about the revolution, what's the sense that you form about the motives that drove Greeks to rebel? And especially the question has to do, did you get a sense of a deep love for their land, for their motherland?
Yeah. Okay, so two things. One, I don't know with any other culture, maybe a little bit, a few, but one thing I found is Greeks love being Greek. Like they love being Greek so much and telling you about how much being Greek is amazing. And it's like, they're like little excited kids, but with the passion of like a belligerent drunk person that wants to like really get it in your face. So like the passion that Greeks have about their land, their place, their everything is amazing. It's stronger than anything I've ever seen in my country. So in terms of that, yeah, there is a pride that's kind of wonderful. Is it about the land, or is it, I don't know whether it's just about the land or if it's just built into the people that that take such a pride in their culture, and they have a lot to be proud of in the past. Granted, the pride is amazing, but we do have to keep doing amazing things, right? Like we can't just say, well, our ancestors were cool, so that makes us good. We all have the responsibility to keep pushing our culture forward so that we're relevant now and current now. So that's something I worry about globally. So I don't know if that answered the question, but yeah.
Thank you, Chris. And we have another question, again asking you to compare This is from Sharon. So as an American, you grew up with ideas about heroes of the American Revolution. The question is, did these ideas affect the way you viewed Greek revolutionary heroes? Or is there something quite different about those involved in the Greek Revolution?
I think there has to be a similarity in that you don't fight, I think, at this level unless you have no choice. Like unless you're pushed so far against a wall that you have nothing to lose, and you have more to lose by not fighting. That's what it takes to get into a position like this. Nobody's hanging out and just decides, yeah, let's go put our life at risk because it'll be a fun thing to do today. You do it because you start to fear that the people you love are in danger, and that your home is going to be taken away, or your relatives are going to be tortured or raped. That's a motivating factor. So it takes these kind of motivating factors, whether it's an American Revolution or Greek Revolution, or pick a country. You have to be pushed so badly against the wall that you're in a worse scenario by not fighting. So I think the differences are obviously tons of, the circumstances are totally different. I think the American Revolution had a lot to do with, finance and economies that were going to be destroyed if, you took away slave ownership and these kind of things. So it's like, yeah, most things do have a financial or economical element, which I think was maybe a little bit different in the Greek Revolution, because it was more about things got bad enough there and wanted to not have someone telling them and controlling them what they can and can't do. I think more so than the American Revolution. But anyway, that's a longer discussion.
I see that we have no other questions from the audience. I want to thank everyone for attending. I want to thank Nikos for co-moderating, for co-sponsoring this event, and the Hellenic American Project at Queen's College. And of course, thank you, Chris, for having created this wonderful graphic novel, but also for giving us the chance to talk about it with you and find out how you were able to create it and hear more of your thoughts. For those of you who are interested in more of our events for the bicentennial of the Greek Revolution, Sharon mentioned some of the events that we are still offering. She mentioned the events that we have offered. You can visit our website in the link that I'm going to provide right now in the chat. We have a lecture next week on Byron and Philhellenism, so building off nicely from Chris's modern Philhellenism, going back to the roots of it. And then in 2 weeks, on October the 2nd, we have a lecture on Byzantine survivals and the Byzantine influence of the Greek Revolution. Once again, thank you everyone for attending. It was great to see you. I hope you enjoy your weekend.
Bye, Sharon. Bye, everybody.
Yeah. Nice to see you all. Thanks for having me.